Hello to all astrology enthusiasts. Today I want to discuss a very interesting aspect that will occur tomorrow, on June 24th, 2025. And this aspect will open up an annual cycle of opportunities, gifts, surprises, and all sorts of pleasant things that, for the most part, bring us joy in life. The aspect will be related to the conjunction of the Sun and Jupiter. Such a conjunction happens once a year, and accordingly throughout the entire year, it gives us certain opportunities. Because Jupiter is a planet that expands, that bestows gifts upon us, that brings us joy. And this planet is social. It likes to, so to speak, encourage our actions, especially in society. And accordingly, the exact aspect will occur tomorrow on the 24th. The conjunction will take place in the sign of Cancer. Let me remind you that Jupiter has already moved into the sign of Cancer. Accordingly, the conjunction itself will occur at 18:9 in the 4th degree of Cancer. Let's take a look at the features of this aspect. I would also like to note that the aspect itself began forming much earlier, back on June 11, 2025. At that time, the Sun was still in Gemini, and accordingly, the entire energy of this aspect will last until July 8, until the aspect fully dissipates. As I mentioned, this energy will launch a year-long program of luck and expanded opportunities specifically in the area of life, in the house of the horoscope, where the aspect itself occurs. So what is this energy and what exactly makes it special? First of all, it's a rather powerful, harmonious aspect filled with expansion, a kind of inner warmth, growth, and the strengthening of our personal identity, because the Sun is present here. All of this happens through feelings, through family history, through our lineage and our belonging to our family or some ancestral story. In general, this conjunction unites two luminaries, each of which symbolizes the development of the personality. The Sun is our center of will, individuality, and self-awareness. And Jupiter is a symbol of faith, a symbol of growth, wisdom, and spiritual law. And we should keep in mind that the conjunction takes place in the sign of Cancer. For Jupiter, this is an excellent position. And in the sign of Cancer, this energy is colored by deep emotionality, intuition, a drive for protection, security, and a return to our roots. Overall, the energy of this aspect appears as a gentle strength. It's a very warm kind of confidence. This is the expression of our care on a very large scale. And the Sun with Jupiter in Cancer gives a very generous yet sensitive kind of energy, which is directed precisely toward showing care and protection, toward unity, and toward a kind of spiritual leadership. And here, expansion happens not through ambition and power, as it might, for example, in fire signs, but specifically through creating an emotional foundation, building family, or let's say collective team homes and connections. Here, the strengthening and deepening of connections in general takes place. There is a very clear support for traditions here, especially family traditions. This is an energy that grows from within, from a feeling that each of us is important, that each of us is needed, that we are connected to something or someone greater precisely through our lineage, through history, through a shared past. The peculiarity of this conjunction is that our personal growth and the opportunities we receive come specifically through our sense of belonging. For example, we realize that our strength right now lies in the past, in our family, in our nation, or in certain emotional attachments connected to family history. And we grow through this aspect. We grow when we take care of others. We grow when we build or create, so to speak, a nest when we protect those who are weaker than us. And here, in this aspect, decisions are made not based on logic, but precisely on what our heart tells us. This is a very deep, intuitive wisdom that teaches us to listen, to feel, to empathize, and to help other people. How can the energies of this aspect generally manifest in our everyday life? First of all, very important events can happen in our family. For example, the family may grow, living conditions may improve, there may be reunification with family, with one's lineage, resolution of conflicts, or rethinking of one's origins. There may be a desire to take care of others. For example, you might want to start or launch a charitable project, provide some support to your parents, create a cozy atmosphere for other people, or take on the role of guardian or mentor. There may be situations where we feel that our inner world is expanding specifically through spiritual or emotional practices. For instance, we may come to a very deep understanding of ourselves. In other words, with this kind of energy, we can gain insight into our traditions or our life's meaning, our roots. During this aspect, our authority grows significantly and our confidence increases, especially in the social spheres such as reputation or in areas related to psychology, education, or again, caregiving, for example, through various projects. We can gain recognition in our professions, in our professional activities, especially where we provide some kind of support. Perhaps these are helping professions. Here, with this aspect, increased generosity also arises and becomes apparent. But on the downside, it can also lead to things like overprotectiveness or excessive idealization of the family. In addition, of course, there can also be certain potential shadows and imbalances. That is, when we experience this energy in a negative way, it manifests as an unwillingness to let go of the past. And this is where the idealization of our family, our past, comes into play. Or there may be a desire to save everyone, in other words, a savior complex. Or we may develop a kind of passive belief that everything will somehow resolve itself in any given situation without our active involvement or engagement. Or there may be emotional merging, for example, with a partner. And in this case, we can lose our personal boundaries. If we look at the manifestations of the energy of this aspect on three levels, let's say, the mental, emotional, and physical health, and on the mental level, our consciousness expands precisely through memory, ancestral memory, or through family traditions. That is, our interest in family history, our culture, and our national identity increases. We may find ourselves returning to the past, more often to our parents, our home, our childhood. In addition, we may develop a desire to learn through feelings. What does this mean? It means not acquiring new knowledge academically, but rather intuitively. In other words, we might become interested in topics like psychology, family therapy, or subjects related to upbringing and spirituality. Here, we may develop a very gentle, receptive outlook on life, shifting from criticism to acceptance. We move away from rationalism and start listening to the voice of our heart. Our thinking becomes more philosophical. That is, we reflect more on the meaning of life, faith, value, see everything connected to our lineage, family topics, and emotional security. For example, we might start exploring our ancestry, studying, so to speak, family chronicles. We might begin writing memoirs, start learning about psychology, or, for instance, genealogy. On an emotional level, we develop a need to love and be loved unconditionally. We long for genuine emotional closeness, sincerity, and warmth. Our compassion grows stronger. It's as if we feel other people's pain. We respond to it and want to help. Our emotions become deeper, softer. It's not about sudden outbursts, but rather a steady warmth. We tend to forgive, to accept, to be genuinely generous from the heart. Here, an internal reevaluation is also possible, that is, the realization that our success lies not in external things, but precisely in inner fulfillment, in how we love, how we cherish, how we care. For example, we might feel the desire to improve our relationships with family, with our parents, to express gratitude to them, or to take someone under our wing who truly needs such support. On a physical level, our need for bodily comfort, coziness, warmth, and protection increases. We want to arrange our space, do renovations, cook homemade food, and surround ourselves, so to speak, with our own people. We may develop a desire to start a family or strengthen our family, have a child, expand our living space, or reinforce family ties. At this stage, our body craves gentleness, rest, and a sense of grounding. This could be, for example, a warm bath, comfortable sleep, food, anything that gives us a sense of stability. We may also develop an increased interest in health, for instance. And since the sign of Cancer is associated with things like nutrition, immunity, and rest, all of these come to the forefront. For example, we might start taking care of the whole family's nutrition, or we might move to more comfortable housing. We might pay more attention to body therapy in our lives, relax by the water, because both Jupiter and Cancer love the sea. They love springs and lakes. Let's also pay attention to the positive and negative manifestations of these aspects' energy. If we talk about positive, constructive ways of experiencing this energy, then our growth here happens through care and compassion. That is, we want to take more care of other people, of our family, parents, and loved ones. We develop a sense of soulful mission, a desire for others to feel well. We may feel a desire or a sense of support from our family, our lineage, our traditions, and our culture. In other words, we may feel that we are precisely the continuation of that very lineage, and the family's mission becomes clearer to us. On the positive side, we also talk about expanding our living space. In fact, this is a very favorable aspect for buying real estate, improving our home, moving or growing our family, because it is precisely the home that becomes a source of strength for us. And if we look at the negative side of experiencing this energy, it can manifest as dependency or overprotectiveness. In other words, we want to control everything, but under the guise of caring. This can show up as, I know what's best for you, so I'll decide for you, for example. So it ends up suppressing others' independence under the pretense of love. Or we might help others not out of love, but in order to feel needed or important. And of course, this can eventually lead to feelings of resentment or emotional burnout. And this might sound like I gave everything to everyone and no one gave me anything in return. On the negative side, this means idealizing the family's past, as I mentioned, and being overly sensitive and vulnerable. We become more emotional, prone to taking offense, being moody, and even a bit dramatic. And for some of us, this might trigger, for those to whom it's relevant, the fear of being an abandoned child, especially when we lack that sense of emotional security. And of course, we become dependent on comfort. We want to retreat into our comfort zone, avoid everyday difficulties, tasks, and worries, and we tend to put off making decisions. In other words, it's important for us to feel warm, familiar, and calm. So our focus shifts precisely to these aspects of our lives. And let's take a look at the symbolism of the degree where this conjunction of the Sun and Jupiter occurs. It's the 4th degree of Cancer. I'll also remind you that on June 25, we have a new moon in Cancer, and it's at this very same degree. So thanks to Jupiter, the energy is extremely powerful. And overall, the 4th degree is represented, let me remind you, by the image of a cat arguing with a mouse. I should also mention that this image, this scene, contains a subtle irony, because the cat and the mouse are inherently not equals. One of them is a predator, the other is prey. But there is an argument between them, and the mouse is perhaps trying to defend its rightness or its life, while the cat is trying to justify its behavior. Here we see a clear metaphor for the internal dialogue between our instincts and our reason, between our old animal impulses and our new level of consciousness. What does this actually mean in practice? What is the essence of this energy here? The degree tells us about the presence of an internal conflict after the moment when we made such a big, important, pivotal decision in our life. That is, we have taken some important steps. For example, we left a toxic relationship, we changed our job, our lifestyle, our belief system, but internally we still have old attachments, ties, desires, certain impulses that we can't let go of so quickly and easily. And the process of rationalization begins. In other words, we try to logically explain why we might still want something that no longer really plays a significant role in our lives. So essentially, it's a struggle between the old self and the new self. And the mind uses justification here to avoid growth and return to the comfort zone. But the very potential of the energy of this degree lies in the fact that the symbol reminds us that the path of renewal is not instantaneous. And even after we have undergone radical changes, inside we still feel this echo of the past. And in principle, that's normal. This is a stage of rethinking where it's important for us to acknowledge that, yes, I still want something I've already consciously given up, and not to blame myself for it. The energy of this degree helps us expose our self-deception, the tricks of our mind that prevent us from integrating this state of the new self into our life. And here the potential lies in being honest with yourself and in accepting these inner contradictions to reach a new level of consciousness without suppression, without rationalization. In other words, this is a time to learn how to translate this inner truth into our conscious actions and not remain stuck in endless mental debates. In the context of this aspect, in the context of the Sun's conjunction with Jupiter, by the way, the Sun here can actually highlight this very moment. So the conjunction of these two planets in Cancer brings generosity, expansion, and strengthening. But in this degree, this growth is not gentle. It is rather difficult because we have made an important choice. But our instincts and habits are still kind of pulling us back. It's as if they're shouting at us, go back. It was so comfortable, so great there. And the key theme here is that justification and sabotage are taking place. Moreover, Jupiter can give a very strong ability to confidently justify oneself, to say, I'm right because, and quickly come up with those because reasons. In this degree, the Sun and Jupiter, the Sun representing our ego, and Jupiter, our sense of meaning, can very quickly justify these unconscious impulses instead of admitting that we're actually reverting to these old patterns of behavior. And this can be directly related to personal relationships, family, certain ancestral patterns, or some kind of emotional attachments. That's why it's very important here to honestly acknowledge this inner split and to use the potential of the aspect to the fullest. In other words, you need to be very mindful in order to experience this energy in a positive way for yourself and not try to rationalize old impulses and instincts, but rather to see them, become aware of them, thank them, and let them go. This is a moment when a significant leap in awareness is possible, especially when we simply stop persuading ourselves to remain in our previous state. How might this show up in our lives in general? For example, we leave a relationship, but inside there's a clear thought. What if the person still changes? What if the partner still changes? Or we decide to free ourselves from some ancestral pattern or scenario, but our body and our emotions are still operating in the old way. That is, for example, a feeling of guilt may arise. Or we become independent and self-sufficient, but the habit of being accommodating still pulls us back. At this point, we start coming up with very elegant explanations so as not to change too quickly. That is, we say things like, it's not the right time yet, or I need to figure things out, or I need to prepare myself. So overall, how do we work with this? From a symbolic perspective, how do we work with this energy? Here, it's important to realize that this inner conflict is not our weakness, but rather a necessary stage of transition. Don't rush to conclusions. Give yourself time to see who is speaking inside you. Is it that same old cat or your new mouse, so to speak, in the context of the symbol? Don't justify old patterns, but rather observe how they work, honestly acknowledge them, and honestly let them go. By the way, you can use writing practices to get a clearer picture. And overall, we get this interesting aspect, actually, even an interesting energy when the Sun joins Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. I wish for you to use this energy to your advantage and to be as mindful as possible. In the next video, we'll look at which houses of the horoscope this aspect will occur in for each of the 12 zodiac signs. I wish you success. Subscribe, like, and share this video. See you soon.